They wouldn't even fight Nazis in the movie. There wasn't even a swastika in the movie. For fear of, I guess, stepping on people's toes. And I just find that laughably terrible, right? Captain America is about waving the American flag and going after the Nazis and taking them down. At least the origin story is. Now let's talk about the complication of Captain America later on. That's fine, right? But my point is that, you know, at the beginning of that story, it seems like that's what they should be doing. Those are the comic book expectations. If you go to the comic book, Captain America is vengefully, maybe not even vengefully, I shouldn't say that, because this vengeance is never necessarily a motivation for Captain America. But he is viciously pursuing the enemies of the United States. Now, those of you that aren't from the United States, you know, that's fine. You can either identify or you could not identify, right? It's not that difficult. Nothing wrong with that. My point is that, you know, if you bring those kinds of comic book expectations, regardless of where you're from, to the film, you're going to end up, I think, very disappointed because Hollywood results ensue. And I think Mr. K has touched on something because that happens for most of the movies that we see nowadays. We come in thinking, we're going to see a great film representation of the comic book, and what we end up seeing is Hollywood drivel. And in the worst possible ways. And that just destroys me. So I thought that was a great, great comment by Mr. K. Estolia, the ever vigilant and you know, always insightful Estolia, talked about the idea of the lack of consequences for superhero movies, and I love that terminology. What a great concept. Many of you talked about rebooting and being a pain in the ass and being a terrible thing that happens to films. Couldn't agree more. Couldn't agree more. But why is it? Why does that screw things up? The reason it screws things up is because it really gives them that false safety net. It brings you to a place where it doesn't matter what kind of stinking pile of crap you make as a movie, because you can always go and remake it. If you make a superhero film of a very popular superhero, Superman for example, doesn't matter how bad the movie is, people are going to go see the movie that love Superman. Maybe people that you know are only lukewarm and possibly interested will go see it as well, but at least you'll make enough money to go, you know what, let's go back and let's make this the right way, or let's make this a different way, or let's get a different focus. Which, coincidentally, is exactly what they're doing with Superman. And Superman is one of those things. I think Mr. K actually mentioned this, that he's not giving up on films until they make the Superman, they do Superman correctly. And, you know, I think that's just awesome, right? Captain America is Marvel's version of Superman, and vice versa. You know, DC's version of Captain America is Superman. And, you know, I haven't seen either one of them be done, I think, in a way that until the Avengers movie, I hadn't seen any of them, you know, touch those characters in a way that I thought was very appealing since Christopher Reeve. I mean, Christopher Reeve did an awesome job. Just watch, and I'm not talking about Superman 2 and 3, right? Watch the original Superman and try not to absolutely fall in love with that character. Christopher Reeve did an awesome job with it. He was Superman, and it just reminded me of how terrible tragedy is that he's gone, because he was such an incredible presence and an amazing actor. Felix talked about, you know, I thought this was just a staggeringly good analysis. It follows with so many of you guys really put some great thought into this. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Felix talked about how the familiar is not always a bad thing. In fact, the familiar, he would argue, and I have to say I agree 100%, is what makes those superhero movies awesome. So it's not necessarily, let's take a look at it a different way. It's not necessarily they're breaking new ground, that they're, you know, boiling the ocean a different way and coming up with a couple good ideas. It's that there is real, power in the idea that superheroes represent characteristics, universal themes that are representative of humanity, and that's why we like them. And that leads me to, before I dive into that, let me dive into the next comment, which is from Matthias. And Matthias says that good versus evil, this kind of false dichotomy, and gets on his soapbox, his Nietzschean soapbox, right? Beyond good and evil soapbox, to talk about, Nietzsche says good and evil are relative terms that are very difficult to differentiate, and by the way, it doesn't even really matter what they mean, because at the end of the day, what they really are is false dichotomies by which, if all of us live our lives in those regards, we're living false enslaved lives, being falsely enslaved by the ideology of lesser humans, right? And thusly, we must liberate ourselves from these kinds of things, and instead, we must look to the broader instincts and the more pure elements of humanity in order to really live liberated lives from these ideologies. Now, I think in those two ideas you find, and by the way, Matthias said something later on about trolling, and I just think that's ridiculous. I don't think there's any trolling going on here. What I find is good, honest, heartfelt analysis. That's not trolling, guys. Trolling is coming in and saying, something stupid, misspelled, just to get people to go crazy, right? With the education of a fifth grader. None of you guys do that. That's why I love reading your comments. Matthias has one vein to talk about the idea of these kind of tropes and trends, these themes are tired, they're worn out, they're old hat. And then you've got Felix saying they're not worn out at all. In fact, the very reason we're at this place is because we have not done a good enough job at representing the universal themes of humanity. And that as long as superhero movies continue to do that, and really almost any movie, to be honest, as long as they fail to do that, they will fail to inspire us. But as long as they do it, they will inspire us. Now, these two things seemingly fight each other. But I think you could take that position. What I want to say is this: if I have a tendency, and trust me, I have my Nietzschean moments as well. He's one of my favorite philosophers, and How One Philosophizes with a Hammer remains one of my favorite works of contemporary philosophy. In any case, the point is that I tend to side more with Felix on this. I think superheroes, the entire reason superheroes exist is because, like most science fiction, good science fiction, we take society, we change a rule or two, tweak it. In the case of Superman, someone that has superpowers, granted, can fly, can do these things, right? Tweak it. Tweak reality just a little bit. The rest is the same, though. And then we say, what would happen in this? And by virtue of the drama that ensues, what can we learn about humanity? That's good science fiction. It's also why comic books, I'm going to argue, really talk to the universal themes about life and about humanity. And folks, that's where it's at. And for my money, the reason that Captain America is so neutered and is so watered down and awful from the film that was released earlier this year is because it doesn't do that at all. It tweaks the formula a little bit. So Captain America, we get this place where you can inject, we inject this person with a super serum, and all of a sudden they just become this super soldier and are capable of so many things. Okay, great. Tweak reality. But they didn't just tweak reality a little bit, they took it completely out of reality. There's no Nazism here. There's this weird, funky offshoot led by this guy with the red skull who is bad. Notice I didn't say evil, I said bad, right? You want to know why? Because the word evil isn't even in that movie. It's not even there, right? It's, these people are bad. They do bad things. They want bad stuff for people. That is absurd. Where is evil? Where is this Captain America figure that's going to stand up? It's not about the little guy, and it's not about the bullies of the world, right? Which is the theme of the movie. It's about standing up for what's right in the midst of being surrounded by what's wrong, and what's evil, and what is consuming people's souls. And I thought that, and maybe this is only one particular ideology, and I apologize, guys, but I think you see my point. Take any other story. what makes them good is precisely that, and that's why I agree 100% with Felix. And I've already bled into my opinion, so I'll continue to jump into it. I am not tired of superhero movies in as much as they tell a story of humanity. In as much as they promote the best parts of humanity, and they continue to help us exercise the evil and destructive parts. You know, I'm all for something like the Avengers, which, for example, is a fantastic, you know, summer blockbuster film. It is almost, bar none, right, the best summer action movie, not action, summer blockbuster movie that's ever been made, in my book. It just hits every single, you know, trigger that it needs to hit in order to be the summer blockbuster that it is. But, and some of you talked about this, here's my opinion about it. The reason why you will never see the Avengers win an Oscar is because the Avengers is not The Dark Knight, is not Watchmen. The Avengers is a great summer blockbuster, but it doesn't have a lot of depth to it. It's not a tremendous, you know, it's a movie that goes about a mile deep and kind of just rides along. It doesn't do anything more than that. And it's great for that whole mile, and it just goes the whole way through. And it doesn't matter if you're in love with Scarlett Johansson, you think Sam Jackson is the coolest, you know, person on the internet. I was going to go into some of his language there. Or if, you know, you just love the way Mark Ruffalo plays the Hulk. Whatever you like, there's something for you here. But The Dark Knight is thematic of humanity. There is that great, wonderful speech by Morgan Freeman in the Dark Knight film, where he talks about the nature of the Joker. Not just being evil, but being thoroughly evil. These are people that don't just want to hurt people. They're not just bad. But there are people out there that want to set fire to the world just to watch it burn. That is something you will never see in an Avengers movie, folks. It's something you'll never see in a watered-down, crappy-ass, you know, Captain America flick. But you do see it in The Dark Knight. And I have to say, I have the utmost respect of Christopher Nolan, and I now have the utmost respect of Joss Whedon, someone I've had my problems with before. Many of you know that I can't stand Firefly, and I never really was a fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, so on and so forth. But now I got mad respect for the guy. But the depth of The Dark Knight just keeps going. Just keeps going and going and going. You can watch that film. You know, why do we fall, Bruce? To find ways to pick ourselves, you know, because we have to learn to pick ourselves up again, right? Those kinds of themes are things you do not see in films today, folks. You're especially in the superhero films that we see today, which is what I'm really talking about, right? We don't see a lot of that. And so let's differentiate. Many of you did this between the Avengers and between something like The Dark Knight. As long as we split those apart, I'm not tired of superhero movies, because they can keep making something like The Dark Knight forever and ever and ever, and I will never be tired of it. But there comes a certain point where I'm going to get pretty sick of the Avengers. Even if it is a great summer blockbuster movie, I'm not going to see anything more about it, because it just doesn't really get things going anymore. The action's done, the time is dried up. Everything's just, you know, the characters are kind of stale, and you can't have the ensemble working together as they do for so long without getting stagnant. So whether you think stagnation has happened or not, you know, maybe I'm splitting the question here, but I'm sick of superhero movies rebooting, all those things that you talked about. Completely agree. But I'm not at all tired. I'm not at all exhausted with The Dark Knight. And I want to say that that this is the point that I want to make about superhero movies. I'm not tired at all about that stuff, and I hope you guys aren't either. All right, now I guess I can get off my soapbox now, huh, guys? So yeah, talk for a long time about the superhero movies. I think it warrants that kind of conversation. You guys did such a great job with analysis on this. I really wanted to be able to treat it with the kind of analysis that I think it deserves. And by the way, like always, if you guys have comments about what I have to say, you have suggestions for the Weekly Ringer, you want to continue the conversation, feel free to send me a private message on the site, clanofthegraywolf.com. You can also send me an email at commodore128@clanofthegraywolf.com. Or feel free, and please let me know if you do this, you're going to start a new, start a forum thread to talk about something, and I will actively pursue that. The conversation